Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. This is episode 47. It is Friday, April 1st, 2022, and I'm your host, Christopher Anastasio, and welcome back, guys. Our second episode this week. Definitely encourage you to check out episode 46 from a couple days ago. Basically, just giving you a very high-level recap. Just discussed some news that came out for both Facebook and Twitter that was kind of interesting this week. I wanted to kind of get that news out to you guys in that episode. The Facebook news was really kind of centered on this this whole thing about its interest targeting is wrong 30% of the time, and I kind of flipped that around and said, well, that means it's right 70% of the time, so it's actually kind of good. So if you want my take on that, definitely check out that episode. Also in that episode, talked about Twitter and the fact that on Twitter, you can now use the professional, you can take your account, if let's say you have a Twitter that you use for business, and you can switch your Twitter account to professional profile. And if it's anything like, if you guys use, let's say, Instagram, and you have that professional profile activated there, and it gives you all those insights into interaction with your content. If it's anything like that on Twitter, I think it's really worth taking a hard look at that. So anyway, that's episode 46 from a couple days ago. Today, very, very tactical, targeted episode. I just kind of wanted to share this with you guys. It was a revelation I had working on a particular client's content, and how we repurposed it, or how we plan to repurpose it into many, many pieces of content. And the interesting thing is, guys, if you listen to episode 39, came out on February 25th, that was, you're not producing enough content was the title of that episode. And really talked about like the whole thing of, I think it was in that episode, may have also been in some other episodes, but I talked about the Gary Vee model of publishing 64 pieces of content in a single day. And it was like, oh my God, how can you possibly do that kind of thing? So this was, as I was going through the machinations on this particular idea I was going to throw out to you guys, I realized, okay, this is kind of how that kind of number can come about. When you really look at pieces of content in different ways and from different angles, and you say, okay, wait, this is one piece of content, but it could be more than that, and it could become a number greater than that, right? And so there's just two examples I kind of want to run by you guys here real quick in today's episode, and hopefully it gets you thinking a little bit about like how you could do this on your end with other stuff that you deal with, or content that you have, or things that you have in your library or on your shelf right now, maybe things that have already been released but can be repurposed in creative ways. Okay, so the first example I want to tell you guys is for one particular client. That client has a lot of like customer case studies where it's basically like a user of their software saying, hey, here's what I liked about the software and the product. But the case studies kind of follow the same pattern where the client answers a series of questions. I believe there's like 7 or 8 questions that they answer, like what did the software do for this? Or how did the software help you do that? Or when you use the software, how much time did you save? Questions like that. Like, I'm not going to give you the exact ones, but basically it was like 7 or 8 questions like that. And the whole piece of content was a PDF that had these very colorful, like with a border around them, segments that had each one of these questions and then the answer underneath it, okay? So basically, like I was looking at this, I was kind of reviewing this PDF and this one piece of content for release that we're going to run on a LinkedIn post, and I kind of looked at it and I was like, wait a second, this one single section, this one question with the answer below it, looks like a nice piece of content. So just to play around on my phone, I screenshotted the PDF, and then I kind of cropped it so it was only the quote. And all of a sudden, it kind of jumped out a little bit. Like it had a red, the question was like with a red background and white font, and then the answer was against a white background. It had like a dark blue font, and it had like a dotted line kind of border around it, like a heavy dotted line border around it. And I was like, wow, this is great. This can really be like repurposed into, a single quote. So like now all of a sudden, instead of posting the entire case study with some copywriting that says, hey, check out what company so-and-so thinks about software XYZ, it could be much more narrow. And it could say something like, hey, check out what our customers said about our ability to save time for their company with our software. And then boom, there's the quote about saving time. And it's a colorful quote, and it jumps off the page, and it just gets to that one differentiator. It doesn't get lost in the whole PDF, which has its own purpose. I mean, it's not a bad thing, that whole PDF that has all the questions on it. But in this case, if we're targeting time saving, we can extract that quote, we can cut that quote out of that PDF and now use it as a second piece of content. And oh, by the way, there's 6 or 7 other quotes in there, and that creates another 6 or 7 pieces of content in the same fashion, doing the exact same thing that I just described. So you take the one PDF, then you got these 7 quotes, so there's 7 pieces of content there. So all told, you have 8 pieces of content minimum off this one PDF. And you could even argue that some of the quotes that were lengthier, you could extract 1 or 2 lines. I mean, you could literally take, a sentence or 2 from them and use those. But, that gets really, really granular, and, you just got to decide if it's contextually relevant to do that. But I think the bottom line is you have these sort of 8 pieces of content in this one example that I talked to you about that you're kind of like sitting on and you don't even realize you're sitting on it. Like, honestly, I had seen these PDFs a few times. It wasn't the first time we created one, but it occurred to me last night, like, okay, let's look at breaking this thing down into multiple pieces. And now all of a sudden we've really made our lives easier because we created one asset that can be used 8 times at a minimum. And really, when you reinforce a message, we're going to use it more than those 8 times. I mean, we're going to use some of these things many, many times over. Okay, so that was example number 1, guys. The other one, and this one's a little bit different, a little bit more limited, but it was kind of an interesting way to deal with a graphic that I was using for another entity that I've worked with in the past, and that was basically they had on their website they had kind of a nice graphic that the graphic itself was almost like 2 graphics put together. Like there was a left side that had text and some other little fancy kind of stylization around it, stylized content around it. And then on the other side, it was more of like a picture, like a person's picture with an image overlaid on that picture. And so I was looking at it as one graphic, but I was kind of like, geez, this graphic actually kind of hits hard even if you just look at one side or the other. So I could use the right side in certain contexts because that's just the picture. It has no text, but it was kind of a powerful picture. I mean, it was compelling. You're kind of drawn to it when you see the whole thing. And then on the other side, there was the textual piece that could serve as like a reinforcement to, let's say, some copy in the caption. So if you post, let's say, to LinkedIn and you've got some copy in the caption, then you could post this still image underneath it. And it kind of almost says the same thing, but it comes out more graphical and it comes out a little more condensed. So it's a bit more powerful visually that way, right? So basically, so I was looking at this one picture and I was like, geez, there's really 2 pictures here, right? And then there's the original picture. So there's 3 ways that we could use this one picture. So it's just a matter of cropping out, screenshotting that web page, cropping out the whole picture, then taking one half of the picture, cropping that out. There's one file. Then taking the right side of the picture, cropping that out. Now you get the second piece, and then you have the original, the one that's both of them. And all of a sudden, there you go. You got 3 still image graphics that you can use for different purposes and in different settings and in different contexts. And to be honest with you guys, this is really kind of interesting. I haven't had a chance to talk to you guys about it here, so we definitely need to do more of an extensive episode about this at some point. But a couple weeks ago, I did see something about on LinkedIn that there was a study done on video versus still images in terms of reach and engagement and stuff like that. And if I remember correctly, I definitely have to go back and take a look at this, and I definitely have to do a whole episode that's more centered on this. But it was talking about how in some instances or in some context, the still images outdid the video. And of course, this is kind of like counter to what you hear a lot, like, well, video's king. You always want to do video if you can do video. You go still image if you have to go still image, kind of a thing. But this was kind of saying, look, actually still images were being consumed at a greater rate. They were having a little bit more of an impact reach-wise, I think it was, versus video. So all I'm saying that for, we don't want to go down that rabbit hole right now, but what I'm saying is in this example I gave where I took one picture and turned it into 3 pictures, that means I now have 3 still images that are working well on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is liking still images, okay, and it's encouraging that by rewarding that. So now all of a sudden, instead of having 1 in this one asset, I now have 3. And so let's say if I was going to have the 1 and post once a week with it, I now have 3, and I can post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or I could post Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or I could post week 1, week 2, and week 3, and rotate these images out and try different mixtures with captions and stuff and see what kind of results I get. So Anyway, guys, that was the quick kind of down and dirty I want to give you guys on how you can kind of envision repurposing content. Like, just look at it differently, just see it from a little bit of a different angle, and all of a sudden one piece of content becomes 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden it kind of helps you understand why there are guys like Gary Vee out there saying, hey, you should be producing more content. You should be able to crank out more content. It's just looking at things a little differently and being a little bit creative with how you repurpose things in a lot of instances. It's not about just constantly making new stuff and coming up with new ideas. That's impossible. Nobody can do that 64 times over in a day, or any number in a day. I'm just kind of using that number arbitrarily from Gary, but you get my point. Like, it doesn't all have to be brand new original stuff, okay? So anyway, thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate you guys checking in with the podcast this week. Knocked out another couple episodes for you here. Next week, we start approaching episode 50. Super excited about that milestone. So we'll have 48 and 49 out to you the week of April 3rd. And then, of course, episode 50 will be week of April 11th. So super excited about that. Check us out over on Facebook and LinkedIn, on transform.com, on the website. And, of course, please, if you guys like the podcast, if you subscribe to our podcast, if you share our podcast, you are our hero. We definitely appreciate it and are definitely excited about that. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and sign off for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening, guys. Think about how you can reuse content so you don't have to bend over too far backwards to keep up with the pace of production that you need to, in my estimation. This is a way for you to kind of help yourselves out with that. Okay, guys, thank you so much again for listening. Hope you guys have a great weekend, and we will see you again next week, week of the 3rd. Thanks a lot, guys, and we will talk to you again soon. All right, bye-bye.